Hi everyone, this is Greymond and this is OCD Live. Let's get to some questions. Okay, so the first question I had was about, I'm not going to read you guys the whole question because, it's one of those things where it's privacy. I don't want people to get upset because, I'm reading something I shouldn't. So I'm not going to read the full questions, but I'm going to give you basically the small version of it. So the person worries about feeling guilty for basically enjoying life as after the thought. So as they're fighting the thought and they say, I'm choosing not to react, I'm choosing not to pay attention, at the same time, they feel like, okay, well, if I'm not paying attention or if I'm choosing to disregard, it's like I like it or like, I think, the thought is good, or you know what I mean, like if I'm a good person I should be feeling bad, but I'm choosing not to, and it creates a conflict. So first of all, what I would like to say about that is that it's called the backdoor spike, which means that after the spike has left and after, well, not fully gone, but after it's almost gone and you're really on your way to beating the situation, this particular battle, you have feelings of guilt, like maybe you shouldn't be in this kind of thing. So just wanted to tell you that's very, very common. It happens pretty much for everybody, and you just gotta power through that guilt. There's not really anything you can do about it, because the reason why your brain is sending you that guilt and that backdoor spike, because your brain fully thinks that this is a real thought. And the reason why it thinks that is because in the past you were seeking reassurance, whether in the form of analyzing or asking from other people or research or avoiding. So anyways, it's been put on the path, like your mind has been put on the path to this thought is real and true. And now that it thinks that, it's gonna give you feelings as if it was real. Because if the thought was real, you would feel guilty, right? So it gives you those feelings as if it's true. So you have to disregard the feelings, the uncomfortable emotions, the physical symptoms that come along with it. Everything that happens along with this spike, and now the backdoor spike of the spike, basically, you have to disregard it. And just power through. It's like, you're 90 or about 80% there when the backdoor spike happens, and you just gotta put your head down and plow forward and finish the course. It's like you're close to the finish line, but you're not quite there, and that feeling of fatigue and the feeling, and in this case feeling of guilt and all of this, it's starting to get to you. You just have to finish the course, and not let these thoughts get to you, because they're auto-generated. This is the biggest lie about the OCD, and the biggest kind of trap is that the person thinks, well, why this thought? Why me? Why am I having this thought? Does this mean something? It's all an automatic process. It's a mechanical process. You made something relevant to your mind, and now it thinks it's relevant and it's running with that. You stop making it relevant by disregarding, and eventually it will say, okay, it's not relevant, I'll drop this subject, bring up something else. Something more important. So that's the thing, is like you have to always, it's like you're filtering what your mind is throwing at you. And usually this, it happens naturally, but when it comes to OCD, some of these thoughts get out of control, and we have to pull back on them and get you out of it. So, and then afterwards, after you get out of your current thought, then the next important job is to disregard any future thoughts right when they hit, because that's the critical time, is that right when they hit, you have a chance to just let go of it, and it's not going to bug you for a long time. But if you wait, and if you make it kind of important by paying attention to it constantly, by doing analyzing, it's like every time you do any of those actions, you are trying to relieve anxiety for now, but you are causing long-term focus on this thought. So your mind thinks, oh, this person is seeking reassurance in some way. That means the thought is dangerous. I better send more in the future. So what you're doing now is guaranteeing how your OCD will be in the future. Either way, If you disregard, you're guaranteeing that your OCD will be less. If you pay attention, you guarantee that your OCD will be more. So you're building your future based on what you're doing today. And this is why, like, some people say I'm kind of tough, in in my presentation, but it's just because I went through it, and I know how bad OCD is, firsthand. So it's not, I don't want anybody to suffer, and especially, when you already know what to do, you have to power through, you have to keep going, because it's just, it takes your life away, this OCD stuff, and the more you kind of focus on it, the worse it gets. It's one of those things that it doesn't go away on its own. I mean, I'm assuming there is people in the world for whom it does, but they are so rare, and there would be like kind of a strange circumstance based on which it would go away. Maybe like the focus would have to shift because something important happens in their life, like extreme, and they would have to shift focus. So, but usually OCD just gets worse and worse unless the person does something about it, And that's why it's important. So what you're doing today really matters. And with this backdoor spike stuff, you're almost there. You've already disregarded. You've already done the right thing. Now just finish the course and just don't allow these thoughts to get to you. Don't buy into the guilt that it's trying to put on you. You're guilty of nothing, and the reason why you're disregarding the thought is because it's not important. It has nothing to do with being a bad person and all of this stuff that OCD tries to kind of put on you. It's just because it's like, if you had a thought that, I don't know, you caused some terrible situation to happen, and, it's obviously not true. Why would you feel guilty about it? If you let go of the thought, why would you feel guilty about it? Anybody can have a thought. It doesn't really matter, It's just your reaction to the thought that matters. And if you start to react to the thought as if it's true, you're going to get more of these thoughts. And that's what you don't want. So that's why they say, like, sit with the anxiety. Because even though it's hard to, and you want to relieve the anxiety, the more you relieve it, your brain doesn't understand that you feel bad and then you get anxiety and that it's uncomfortable. Your brain understands that you are paying attention or you're not paying attention. It's like a yes or a no. It's not really an overall state. So by you paying attention and trying to relieve the anxiety, it understands that as if you're protecting yourself from a real danger. Just like we've talked about the bear in the woods in the last in the previous OCD lives. That the more you focus on the bear, the more you're gonna worry about it. So it's very, very important. Go forward, finish the course, and don't pay attention to these thoughts. No matter how severe they get, no matter how severe the guilt gets, it's all a lie. I promise you. I have a lot of experience talking to people. I've had my own personal experience of overcoming OCD. It is always a lie. I have not met one person in all my time of doing this where they thought about something, they worried about something, and then later it turned out to be true. It just doesn't happen. Because when people do things that maybe, I mean, we're all human, right? Like when people do things that they're not particularly proud of, as we all have, they don't worry about whether it was true or not. You can attach a situation to it, but okay, so say for example, like you had a situation you're not proud of, and then you can attach another situation to it, That happens all the time. I see that all the time. But I never see, a direct thing where a person worries about this, they disregard as OCD, later it turns out to be true. It doesn't happen. So don't be, stick with your logic. Basically, don't stick with your emotions, because the more you focus on the emotions, the more OCD will sway you, and the more you will feel like you need to kind of look further into it, analyze, which will give you more thoughts, and then you're going to kind of, it's like going down the rabbit hole. It's just going to keep going and going and going, So that's why. And I always say that the best way to handle this kind of stuff is just to say, okay, what is the general, the basic thing of your topic? Is it a driving OCD where you think you're always thinking in some way like you hit somebody driving or you did something while driving? Or is it a harm OCD where you think you've harmed somebody? You know, what is the basic theme? And or for example, something to do with a relationship with your partner, you know, something like that, relationship OCD. So figure out what your basic theme is, and then say, okay, if it has to do anything that has to do with, for example, driving, this is gonna it's off limits. I'm immediately not gonna pay attention to it, you know. Or anything that has to do with my relationship, like OCD thoughts, I mean, not just generally, but OCD thoughts that have to do with my relationship, like annoying, obsessive thoughts, I'm not gonna pay attention to it, you know. And when that thought comes in, you say, oh, that's about the driving, not paying attention to it. That's about the relationship, not paying attention to it, and moving forward. And your brain will see that you're doing that, and it will eventually there'll be a change in kind of attitude of the brain. I know it's kind of very flowery term, but whatever. But in the attitude of the brain and how it interprets what you're doing, and it's going to start to help you, because right now it's fighting against you because it's going on the old programming. You're changing the programming because logically you have the ability to do so. Your brain is working, that part of the brain anyways, is working on instinct, or not on instinct, on preset program from before. So it's working on what you've been doing in the past, not on what you're doing now. But it will be working on what you're doing now in the future. You know? So it's one of those things that as you progress, it's gonna continue forward. But right now you just have to kind of power through the anxiety because it's old programming, you know? Doesn't matter anymore, but you kind of have to wait it out basically. Okay, so the next question I had is the person feels that, well, what if it's not OCD talking to, like saying things to them basically, like giving the thought? What if it's not your brain sending a faulty thought, but what if it's actually like a higher power talking to them, or higher power trying to send a signal or something like that? And again, this is another way of OCD trying to get to you. Well, what if? If you start out saying, what if, you know, that automatically is the first sign that this is OCD. Because if it wasn't OCD, then you wouldn't think, what if? You know? Like, for example, you know, this is, yeah, that I don't even want to get into the kind of deciphering what is higher power talking to you and what is not, because again, this is reassurance where we're trying to reassure you that you are safe and this is not higher power, and that's not what you want to do. And again, the best course out of that, like out of that thinking of what if it's like God speaking to you or trying to kind of tell you information that maybe something happened or something like that, when these thoughts come into your mind, you want to say, this is my usual OCD pattern, and this is another basically way of having a backdoor spike, what we just talked about is, well, what if it's true? Well, what if it turns out true? Well, what if it's not an OCD thought? What if it's, you know, higher power talking to me? It's all the same thing. It's basically your mind is not sure yet, because what you've been doing before is you've been telling your mind that black is white, and now you're telling it that black is black. You know, so your mind doesn't know what to think. Is it white? Is it black? I don't know, you know. So it just doesn't know, because you've been telling it one thing and now you kind of flipped it around. So it's sending you all of these backdoor spikes and different ways to try to kind of talk you back into feeling anxious. Because the reason why your mind wants you to feel anxious is not because it doesn't like you, because it wants you to suffer. It's because it's trying to make sure you are safe. When you are anxious, you're going to protect yourself. You're going to get reassurance, all of this stuff. And when you do that, reassurance is safety, right? So all it wants is for you to be safe, because when you have OCD, when you have an OCD thought and you react to it the wrong way, it feels like your world is ending, you know? So, and that feeling really, it ensures that you are like that you're gonna do reassurance. Basically, that's why the feeling is there. Is so you're gonna do reassurance. You know, that's why it's being sent to you. That's why you're feeling anxiety. Your mind really wants you to do reassurance. And the more you pay attention to these thoughts, you know, the paying attention is reassurance. Because by paying attention, what are we talking about? We're talking about either analyzing or avoiding or seeking reassurance from other sources. All of those are different forms of reassurance with the same result. Your mind says to you, be scared of this situation. This is important because like from based on the past, and you say, okay, I'm scared, I'm paying attention to it, it's important. Your mind catches that signal and says, okay, he or she's still scared, better send her more or him more. You know, so it becomes a loop where it's going around and around. Your mind throws a ball at you, you throw it back. You know, it becomes like a ping pong game. You know, you really shouldn't be doing that as much as you can. And you know, this is another thing that I always talk about, that no recovery program, recovery path is a linear path, meaning the person always does the right things. The most important thing is that you do the right things, meaning no reassurance, much more than you do the wrong thing. But you have to understand we're all human, and you're going to have that day where you just, you know, just doesn't happen and you start seeking reassurance and all of this stuff. Those days will happen, and the most important thing is in those days, pick yourself up as fast as you can. So you did reassurance for an hour, fine, you know, but pick yourself up now. Don't make it 2 hours. Don't make it a day. Don't make it a week. You know, really pull yourself out of it as much as you can, and just kind of know that the faster you do it, right after the thought hits, uh, the worse it's gonna be. The better it's gonna be. You know, because the faster when you catch the thought right in the beginning, it doesn't have that foothold to stand on, basically, you know. So you disregard it, it's going to go away. Your mind doesn't have much of an emotional attachment to it, so it's going to go away pretty quickly. But if you pick this up days later or months later or years later, it's a little bit more difficult. But I've helped people in the recovery program who have had OCD for years, so it's not impossible, but it does take effort, you know. And that's, you know, that's what I say, that when people ask me about the recovery program, I'm like, you know, honestly, it works for everybody, and everybody recovers who focuses on the recovery. If you just listen to me talk and then go on with seeking reassurance, it's not going to work. The recovery program is meant to help you do what you're doing, you know? So I show you what to do, and then every time you have a problem, you can contact me, and we have frequent sessions, so you're able to correct the behavior, make sure you're staying on the path. But it is up to you to stay on the path, because I'm not there with you 24/7, you know. I'm there with you once a day, or, you know, as much as you need to. But in that moment, in that second, you need to make sure you're doing the right things. And if you're not, then either if you're doing the recovery program with me, you know, you call me, you message me, and then we'll deal with it right on the spot. You know, because just to make sure that you are going to follow through in the right way. Not that you're going to get a spike, worry about it, you know, and then later dig yourself back out of it. We want to make sure that you don't dig yourself in, you know. So, and if not with me, then with somebody else, you know, that's it's important. And that's why, you know, I always get very kind of upset about how doctors treat OCD, because once a week sessions, I do have a once a week session package, but it takes a really kind of strong person to do that, because OCD is one of those things where it hits you 24 hours a day. You know, so you talk to a person once a week, they tell you what to do. You're gonna say you talk to them on a Friday. By Saturday morning, you'll forget half the things they said. I find that the best way to do this is to do it every other day, or every 2 days, like 2 days in between, kind of being able to talk to somebody about, and make sure you're following the no reassurance, because it's reminding what to do, adjusting what you're doing, because maybe that you are avoiding something you're not realizing you're avoiding, all of those things. So if you don't have anybody, really, you can do this by yourself. It's just a lot more difficult, but really focus on where are you making these mistakes, where are you letting OCD win, and really try to eliminate it. Really honestly fight it with everything you have, because there's no point in continuing suffering. It's such a severe disorder, and I mean, you do have the power to. I'm not the most strongest willed person in the world, but I can fix it. So if I can fix it, then you can fix it. you know so, and just kind of make sure make sure you're doing the right things, because that is the most important. No reassurance of any kind, no avoidance of any kind. I mean, it's gonna happen. There's gonna be avoidance, there's gonna be reassurance, but if you try to stick to the principle of not doing it at all, then even if you slip, you're only gonna slip a little bit, which means you're gonna be progressing through your recovery faster, because you're making more steps forward than backward. So anyways, so I hope that covers that. Okay, and then the last question I had is about unwanted bodily reactions, especially for guys. I'm sure everybody knows what I'm talking about. So basically, the way this happens, the reason why it happens is, again, same thing, is because you are paying such a close attention to a particular situation. And when you're paying such, like, you're creating this hyper focus on this situation, your body is gonna produce the reaction that you're afraid of. And when it does, then because it's a physical reaction, you're gonna start to worry about it even more, because you're like, oh my god, well, if this is happening, that means all of this stuff, right? Like, this is what's going through your mind. So again, making sure your attention is not focused on it, and these situations will go away on their own. But while this stuff is going on, the more you kind of avoid things, the worse it's going to get, basically, because as you start to avoid things, you are, again, focusing more on the situation. So I don't want to be too descriptive about this particular question, and the person who asked the question knows what I'm talking about, and I'm sure people who are in a similar situation also understand what I'm talking about. So you have to make sure that when you get this physical reaction, that you are not frightened by it. Expect it to happen. Like, think of it this way, okay? Right now you're thinking, oh my god, why is this happening? And you're saying that to your mind. You're throwing that signal out. So your mind says, oh, he's scared. Let's send more of the same thing, Again, just like what we talked about in an emotional sense with the backdoor spikes and all of that, this is just in the physical sense. Your mind controls both the physical and the emotional, and it's really the same thing anyways, right? So it can give you either or. Just because it's a physical reaction versus an emotional reaction, it doesn't make a difference in the sense of it being more true or less true. None of it is true, and if you stop focusing on it, it's gonna go away. It's similar to if, for example, people are worried that they have certain illness, and then the more they pay attention to it, they start to develop symptoms of it. Well, I think I have kind of this, and I think I have kind of that, and it happens because they're focused on it already. So same thing with this. As you start to disregard, you will see that it's happening less and less and less. Because that's why it's happening more, is because you're paying attention. So no matter what happens, whatever thoughts you get, whatever bodily reaction you get to those thoughts, not paying attention to it. If it's an incorrect reaction to an incorrect subject, whatever, you know. This is all OCD based, you know. You fix the OCD, all of these additional problems are going to go away, you know. They're all part of the whole problem. They're a symptom. It's like when you get over a cold, you're not going to have runny nose, right? Same thing, when you get over OCD, you're not going to have these additional symptoms, you know, whether physical or emotional. So, and like I said, the way to get over OCD is just disregard the thoughts. I'm not going to avoid anything in my life because I'm having this reaction. I'm not going to change any way I do things because of this reaction. This reaction, the physical reaction, does not exist to me right now. Even if it's real, it doesn't exist, you know, in a way that I'm going to alter my life because of it. You know, because the more you alter your life, the more relevant you make it, and the more of these reactions you're going to get. And the less you alter your life, the less you get of it, and you know, you're helping yourself recover. So just really everything I say about the emotional reactions applies to the physical reactions as well, you know. And usually also, like, another type of physical reaction is sometimes, like, when I start out talking to people, because usually when people call me, they're in a kind of a very severe state, and when we first start talking, they say that, you know, I'm having physical symptoms, such as, like, you know, feeling like sick to my stomach, feeling the need to throw up, feeling really sick, you know, like physically sick almost, right? Like, well, really physically sick. And then as we go through the recovery program, they stop feeling that way, you know, because again, the situation changes. It's not like, you know, the thoughts are the same, but the anxiety starts to go down, you know. And this is a little bit obviously different, but it's the same thing, that just because you're having these situations now, it doesn't mean it doesn't really mean anything. And honestly, I see physical symptoms a lot, and these specific symptoms, what you're describing, a lot. So this is not uncommon. It doesn't mean anything about you, but the more you react as if it does, the more it's going to continue, you know. So that's the thing, is you need to make sure you stop your own suffering, basically, you know. And when I had OCD, that's the thing, is like, I kept going around and around and doing reassurance sometimes and not doing it sometimes. Then they said, you know, after a while, you just get to a point where, like, oh my God, like, enough is enough. You know, I'm not going to do the reassurance anymore because it's just leading me in circles, you know. And when you get to that realization, you start to really focus on, you know, you have the I don't care attitude. And honestly, that is the best attitude to have about OCD. Because most of the time, OCD itself takes away more than what you're worried about being taken away if the thought is true or if the situation is true. Because it takes your life away, you know, and it starts to be like, you know, almost to a point where you think, you know what, I would rather this one situation be true than have to deal with the OCD for the rest of my life, you know. And that is a good start of a fight, you know, because you gain ground by just thinking that way, that you're no longer scared of OCD. You can see through it, kind of, and you're able to fight it, and you do fight it. And I see people sometimes, what I see a lot in sessions is if the person is not doing too well, like they're having a hard time resisting reassurance, they have a hard time, you know, time goes by and they're still not doing too well, and then they just get sick of it, you know, that just something happens and they just get to the point where they're like, you know what, Ali, I wasn't quite ready before, but, you know, damn, I'm ready now. Pardon my French, you know. So, and they really start to attack it, and they see huge gains, you know, where before it was like little by little. So, but you know, just being prepared and being focused on it, that this is going to be one of the hardest things you're going to fight probably in your entire life, you know. But I mean, in my program, I would, you know, people were saying on the internet that, like, how do you say, like, 95% of people in the recovery program recover? And I would say that 95% of the people in the recovery program recover. My recovery program, I mean, you know, because it's Some do not, there's a few that do not, and and it's not so much that they do not, it's that it's not, maybe it's not their time yet, maybe they're not ready, maybe there's additional situations like that. But because we make sure that we alter the situation, and that's the thing, if you're doing it by yourself, make sure that you're always kind of examining what's happening. Okay, was I able to resist reassurance this week? Yes or no? Okay. If no, then why? Were you too busy? Were you too stressed? Were you not organized with the OCD? When was the worst time you had OCD? Was it in the morning? Was it in the evening? Well, why? What caused it? So you have to examine these situations not in the specific of the thought, but in why did you react? What could you change in your situation right now to react better in those times? And always examine that and see if you can better the situation. And, that will kind of help you again in your recovery, especially if you're doing it by yourself. So, also another thing that I would like to tell you guys is, we'll talk about it more. I actually want to do a show on this, is make sure that people around you in your family are not enabling you when it comes to the reassurance. So don't ask them for reassurance, and when you're feeling like on one of your stronger moments, talk to them and say, I know you're trying to help by giving me reassurance, and I know I keep asking for it, but don't, don't help. I'm gonna ask, you have to say no, because that's a lot of the time where the reassurance is coming from, and it's not healthy. And you can use, if that family member is willing to help you, they just think they're helping you with the reassurance, but they can help you in other ways of reminding you what you should be doing. So instead of saying, oh, this is okay, don't worry about it, they can say, listen, don't you remember what you have to do? Why are you doing the reassurance? You have to get back on track. And you'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember. Because sometimes you forget in the moment when you're stressed and anxious, you forget. So try. It's for some people it doesn't really, it's not relevant, but for some people it's really relevant. So just if you're one of those people that does have this kind of family dynamic, make sure that you're using it wisely. And it's good to have. Obviously, it's good to have support, but just make sure that its support is productive towards your recovery and not the other way around. So I hope that answers all of your questions. If not, please email me and I will answer in more detail, or if something is unclear, let me know. If you would like to ask me a question, you can email me at info@youhaveocd.com. Just when you send me the email, please tell me whether you want me to answer on OCD Live or not. I do invite you to allow me to answer on OCD Live, just for the simple reason that I can pretty much guarantee you, if you're having this thought, other people are having the same thought, and it would really help for them to hear an answer, because I can't come up with everything, right? So all kinds of questions. So it's really good for just to go over the situation. So also you can visit youhaveocd.com, and there you can have there's free information there, there's books, there's the recovery program with me. Please check it out, and I'll see you guys next Wednesday.